Hi, everyone. We are Dani and Jamie of Books Are My Fandom, and we are live for another round of BAMFs Aloud. This time, it's our 6th author interview, and we are featuring Kathy MacMillan, author of Sword and Verse. So I'm Dani.
And I'm Jamie.
Okay, and we are joined by Kathy. So, Kathy, can we start with you? Can you introduce yourself and maybe just a little bit about your book?
Sure. So hi, everybody. I'm Kathy MacMillan, and I am the author of Sword and Verse. And I am a librarian, so I can't talk about books without holding them, so I had to hold it up. Yes. I live in Maryland. Right now, I'm actually coming to you from DC, Washington, DC, because I'm at my aunt's house for a party. That's her beautiful Christmas tree in the background, not mine. But I got a nice quiet spot. So let's see. So my book, Sword and Verse, is a young adult fantasy novel that is about a girl who is a slave in a fantasy world called Kilara, and she is from a place where writing is sacred and everyone is allowed to read and write, and the place where she is enslaved, writing is extremely oppressed, and she becomes the royal tutor, which means she is one of 4 people who is allowed to learn the higher order form of the writing, and in doing so, she opens up a whole bunch of secrets about herself and her people and has to find a new way in the world. And there's a lot of kissing too.
Yes, there is.
Yes, there was.
Yeah.
So just as an FYI, Dani and I will be reviewing Sword and Verse on BAMF on January 12th, where you'll also be able to see this video again. As well, Kathy's on our blog on Monday, January 9th for our first Where Are They Now post. So Kathy's answering additional questions from us, and you can learn more about Sword and Verse. And if you're in the US, you can win a signed copy of the audiobook, which Dani is actually listening to. And as well, if you're international, there's a swag pack to win. So for today's session, we're going to start by asking Kathy some questions and then open the floor to you guys to ask questions under the hashtag BAMFs Aloud. So start asking those questions now, or if you're on the YouTube page, do them there. And we'll choose some at random to ask later on in the show.
Okay. So, first question, can you tell us about the star character? So, Raisa. How do we see her change and grow throughout the novel?
Sure. So Raisa is in many ways based on my mom, who is someone who may seem very sort of meek and mild on the surface, but there's a lot going on underneath. And I've always been really fascinated with that type of character, particularly that type of character as a woman in a world that oppresses women. And I'm, in general, in fantasy and in fiction, I'm really fascinated with the character who seems like they don't have a lot going on the surface, that there's so much more going on underneath. Like Samwise Gamgee will always be my favorite in The Lord of the Rings. Yoda will always be my favorite in Star Wars. And so I set out to kind of explore a character like that. And I wanted to explore a character who wasn't heroic as a foregone conclusion. So often in fantasy in particular, we see these female characters who are going to go and save everybody. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with Katniss Everdeen. I love me some Katniss Everdeen. But I wanted to kind of think about, how does a character who isn't naturally heroic get to a place where they're willing to take those risks and do those things, where it's not necessarily natural for them to do the brave or noble thing. And I think that's most of us. And I think in our political climate these days, a lot of us who are not naturally brave and heroic are kind of being called to step outside of our comfort zone, whether it's, calling your congressman or, stepping out and speaking up more. So that's really what her journey is about. Let's see. I made notes because I tend to get excited and go off topic. So I made sure to make notes. But with Raisa, her main thing, her misbelief is that she thinks she can't change things. She thinks that she's stuck in this place, and in order to change things, she would have to have qualities she doesn't have. And all of us have those qualities. All of us can make a difference, even if it's in a very small way. And that's kind of a point that I like to make with Raisa, but it's also done with several other characters throughout the story. There are many characters who very quietly do things that change the course of the story.
Okay. I found it really interesting that you based her on your mom as well, that's really nice. Does your mom know?
Actually, she does, and there's a funny story about that. I told her long ago before the book came out that this character was based on her and all that. And then when she finally read the book, she said, "Now, which character was it that was based on me? Was it the rich one?" And I was like, "The rich, snooty one who's always spouting microaggressions? You think it's her and not the quietly brave heroine?" Like, but it's so funny that people don't necessarily see that in themselves. But.
Huh. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. I definitely feel like you explaining that to me right now has made me realize that about her, because I feel like I thought that as I was reading it, but I couldn't quite put it into words. And like, it was definitely more of like a quiet, when can I become more confident in myself sort of thing that she kind of comes to as the story progresses. And I really liked that. I also I really liked, now I'm on a tangent, but I also really liked when she was like, "Oh, I'm not sure I can do this because it's not me." But then she started doing things that were all these traits. She just didn't acknowledge it until later on that she was actually that person already. So,
yeah.
It's
funny that you mentioned earlier about the audiobook, and that's actually one of the things I love so much about Emily Rankin's narration of the audiobook. I think she really captures that sort of quiet strength of Raisa really well. And I couldn't ask for a better audiobook narrator.
Yeah, she's doing a really good job, because I'm almost finished. I haven't read the end or listened to the end yet on my phone. But I've been told that the ending is really good, though. So. But yeah. Okay. So while you were talking about the book, it wasn't in, it just came to me, the writing systems. Just as a side question, while I was listening, I couldn't help but think of, in a way, Japanese writing, because in Japanese you have 3 different writing systems, hiragana, katakana, and then kanji. And kanji is a really complicated things, and that's based on the Chinese characters. And I was just thinking, because hiragana is kind of like the basic writing in Japanese. And I don't know if you sort of used inspiration from Japanese or any other languages to come up with the idea for these 2 writing systems in the book.
Well, the writing system, it really was inspired by my research into the history of the Latin alphabet. And many alphabet and writing systems have developed in that way. So the reason that it has some parallels in other writing systems is because so many scripts have developed that way. The Latin alphabet originally developed as a more concept-based, the A, I believe, is the one that I should have checked my research before I went, but I believe the A was originally a symbol like a bull. And then eventually it came to mean a sound. So that was kind of the idea, that we would go from this more rudimentary writing system, which the Killerites in their arrogance assume is the best, when in fact the people who have shared language and use language every day, and I think that at one point Raisa compares it to a pot burnished by many hands, because it's been shared so much. And when language is shared, it gets developed and it gets more complex rules, and it becomes actually easier to use. And this doesn't really come out in the first book, but in the second book it comes out a bit, that the system that was used by the Arnathim, the enslaved people who had kept using writing, had allowed everybody to write on the islands instead of just keeping it to this small group of scholars who were allowed to use it. Their writing system and their language was actually much more complex, and eventually becomes easier to use because it's more simplified.
I was going to say, it reminded me a lot of the Latin declinations, because I took Latin and ancient Greek And I was like, oh, like, you know, you can only say certain things in these languages because they didn't have words for other things. Whereas if you use sounds, then you can start being a little bit more complex. So I'm also like a really huge ancient Roman Greek nerd. So I really liked like the writing and the mythology and all that. So.
Oh my God, I really love the, like at the beginning of each chapter, having the little bit of the mythology.
That was really cool too.
Yeah. But I guess what it is like, Jamie, you studied Latin, I studied Japanese, so I guess we can all, because all writing systems have that sort of similar development, like no matter what you've studied, you will see a link there. So
yeah, because it's principles of linguistics, basically. And in fact, some of the grammatical structures in the language of the gods are based on American Sign Language, which has no written form. So
yeah, like I think the writing system was probably my favorite part. So I was like, oh, I'm such a nerd for this, but so cool.
The mythology was like, I was like, oh, I love creation myths and things. Yeah, like the floor was created with the limbs. I was like, oh, okay, so that's how suddenly people have 2 arms and 2 legs, because everything else went to creating everything.
That's right.
So cool. Okay, sorry, I went off topic there, but I had to bring it up.
So our next question that you knew about is, what are your favorite traits about Reza and Prince Mati?
See, this is I have the benefit of the audiobook.
That's right. And I've got to tell you, Emily Rankin is especially awesome because she actually contacted me about all of the pronunciations. And at one point, when she first contacted me, she had come across a pronunciation guide on my website, and she had already started recording, and she realized she had been pronouncing Maddie's name wrong, and she went back and re-recorded everything because she went,
wow.
So, okay, my favorite and least favorite traits. Let's see. So for Raisa, I would say my favorite quality of her is that she is cautious and thoughtful. She's not, again, the brash hero who acts first and thinks later. She always thinks things through, and that can be a positive and a negative. But I feel like that is a type of character that, particularly in fantasy, we don't see very often. And I really wanted to lift up that kind of character because guess what? Thoughtfulness is a good thing. Particularly when you are making choices that are going to cost lives. And realistically, in her situation, she couldn't have survived if she was brash. I mean, she was living her life hiding a piece of writing that would get her killed immediately if anybody found it. I think whenever somebody says something like she's not brave or something, I just want to remind them that she was 6 years old and she hid this piece of writing that she knew would mean her death if they found her. I mean, come on. So she's basically the consummate Ravenclaw. That's my favorite thing about her. My least favorite thing about her is that she does have a tendency to be a bit Pollyanna-ish. And she's always looking on the bright side, which can be a good thing. But in her situation, that can be a negative too, because it blinds her to the things that she doesn't want to see. So she can be idealistic, but sometimes she is so relentlessly idealistic that she doesn't face the truth about what's happening to her. And then for Maddie, my favorite thing, so if Raisa is our Ravenclaw, then Maddie is our Hufflepuff, which I am too, so yay. Maddie always leads with his heart, 100% of the time. In fact, it's kind of funny, there's a scene late in the book, so I won't give it away since one of you hasn't read the ending, but there's a scene late in the book where he is on his way to do something that will save a whole bunch of people's lives. And he sees a little girl getting attacked and he steps in to save her. And one of the editorial notes I got was that it was unrealistic for him to do that because in his position as the monarch, he would consider, the greater good and would do that. And I was like, no, I couldn't put my finger on why I thought that comment was wrong. And my beta reader, Manuela, as soon as she read that, she said, yeah, it's a stupid thing for him to do, but it's 100% the stupid thing Maddie would do. And I was like, yes, that, because he leads with his heart. And then the least favorite is that when it comes down to it, he really does care a lot what other people think, even when he shouldn't. So for example, early in the book, he really does crave his father's approval, even though realistically, he knows that his father is not necessarily someone whose approval he should crave. And that kind of trips him up later in the book, too, when he's trying to please so many people as the monarch, and he's doing things and making compromises that maybe he shouldn't. He also has a lot of unexamined privilege that gets in his way, and although to his credit, he is willing to examine it. And as the story goes on, he examines it more, and in the next book, he does even more.
Okay. So, so I haven't finished it, but I can definitely see the Ravenclaw and the Hufflepuff. What I like about Maddie, though,
everything.
You could have. Well, the thing is, he could have turned out to be like. You could have potentially gone down a route where he ends up being a real jerk. Like at some point, I was like, "Oh, you know what's going to happen now? He's going to turn out to be this jerk that now he's got this like hot thing that he's to whatever, and he can just drop her or whatever." But you know, you didn't go down that route, and I was like, yes.
Yeah, I would say that like one of the things I really liked about both of them is that you could have taken some pretty like cliched tropes and really run with them. And while there are some like cliched tropes, it's not the ones you see over and over again in fantasy novels. And I really liked how I was surprised that it wasn't the same trope over and over again. But I also I really liked that it wasn't that, obviously, otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't like it was unpredictable in its lack of certain tropes that I expected. Yeah.
I feel like we should be asking more questions, but we're just kind of like, this was so good. So
okay, I'll do that too.
Okay, so next question. Who is your favorite secondary character and why?
Okay. So I was thinking about this, and I was thinking that if you had asked me this a year ago, I probably would have had a different answer. But I have just spent a year and a half writing the second book, which is from a different character's point of view. So I've gotten to know that character very, very well. And now I would say she is my favorite secondary character. So I mentioned before that Raisa is our Ravenclaw, Maddie is our Hufflepuff, and Jonas would be our Gryffindor, and that leaves Soraya to be our Slytherin. And so the second book is from Soraya Gamo's point of view. And in the first book, I just saw your eyebrow go up. Okay.
Okay.
So in the first book, Soraya is something of a minor character. She gets more important towards the end, but she doesn't get to experience a whole lot of growth. However, the events of the first book basically turn her life upside down. And so it was very interesting to kind of look at what her perspective would be on the events of the first book. Because think about it, she's this smart, educated woman who has been basically used by her father to try to get close to the crown. But she has her own ambitions and wants to do things. And she's engaged to the prince, she's engaged to the king, yay, she's gonna get a position of power. And Raisa is constantly getting in her way. And when it comes down to it, the only person who really is able to see how much potential Soraya has is Raisa, her greatest enemy. So that was always a really interesting kind of dichotomy to me. And she's so much fun to write because her perspective is so different. So Raisa is this very Pollyanna-ish, like always looking on the bright side. And Soraya is, okay, these are the compromises I have to make to get the thing that I want. And she's very practical, very realistic. She knows money, which makes her very valuable in the second book. She goes through all this stuff and is still able to keep her head up. So to me, she's a really fascinating character, and she's definitely one whose point of view is worth exploring more.
Okay.
Also, I would have never pronounced her name that way. So
okay. Yeah, a lot of people say Soraya, which is typically how it's pronounced. Actually, this is kind of a fun fact. The reason it is Soraya is that in the language of the gods, Raisa and Soraya are inversions of each other.
Oh,
that's the Soraya symbol.
I do know a girl named Soraya, but she spells her name very differently, so that's why I was like, but yeah. That's so cool, though. I like that.
Another fun fact, in the Spanish translation, because Soraya is a very common Spanish name, they're actually changing her name so it'll, fit more with the exotic feel of the other names. And I could not for the life of you tell me what they're changing it to, but I can't remember, but I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, what I think Race's name made me think of, or helped with the whole Japanese thing, because Raisa is a Japanese name. I've known a few Raisas, so I was listening, and then it's only when I looked at the blurb that I saw that it was R-A-I, because in Japanese it would be R-E-I, but I was like, oh, it's a Japanese, no, it's not a Japanese girl, she has red hair.
Yeah, none of them quite fit into any culture that you're thinking of, but if there is one like influence that kind of unifies it, it would be like ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, but even that is not. I took little bits from everywhere.
Oh man, I love ancient, like I don't like history, modern history. I hated studying modern history in school, but when we got to do the ancient history, loved that. We even got to make our own like culture, make-believe culture in one year. That was fun. And then you go ahead and make your own in the books, and you see, I could have turned it all into a book.
See?
I have a degree in it, so I really like ancient Greek history. I don't know, like it's part of my minor in my degree, so whatever. I never got to pick up my own though. I had to study the original, so
yeah.
Well, I mean, we studied the ancient cultures, and then looked at how you would go about, or how they created their cultures, how their cultures developed, and then we're like, okay, now apply that. Show us that you understand by making your own. So
that's really cool. Like I wish that was part of my assignments, but my assignments were like, hi, we're gonna go to a dig site and put a plate back together. And I was like, okay, I'll look at a plate now. So
okay.
Fake dig site, not like a real one. And obviously I didn't keep the plate, but I'm not.
That would have been so much fun.
It would have been.
Yeah.
You can do that at Legoland, I think. You can go and like dig up stuff. Like that is my memory from when I was 11. It's a long time ago. Okay. So, Jamie, move on to audience questions.
Yeah, do you have any over on thing?
I have one. Okay.
Well, that's good because we only have time for one more since we're coming close to the end. Oh
yes. Okay. So the question is, but you've already answered this. It was, what mythology did you draw on for inspiration? And
well, I could think about it.
Yeah, do you want to go on about it, since we all like mythology?
Okay, so definitely ancient Roman and ancient Greek mythology played a role in it. Ancient Egyptian mythology. Almost every culture has a story of how humanity got fire. So that is kind of the idea, except instead of fire, it's writing. And that was kind of the basis for the whole story, because the seed of the idea was I'm a librarian. I love reading about ancient libraries, and give me a big thick book about the Library of Alexandria or how paper was preserved, and I'm just like in heaven. So I was doing some research on ancient libraries, and I came across a reference to ancient libraries that were entirely letters, and I thought, ooh, what if they were letters to the gods? And then that was just kind of like, who would write the letters? What kind of language would it be? And so the whole culture was based around this idea of language being limited. And so then what kind of mythology would give rise to that? So the mythology had to be surrounding how humans got language and how it came from the gods, and how the story of the gods led humans to control language in that way. So even though the idea of human-like gods who have powers, that kind of came from a lot of these ancient cultures. But the whole idea of the language was kind of laid on top of that.
That's really interesting.
I really like, yeah. I've already said this. The whole, it's kind of like a diary though, like writing these letters to the gods. Like, today this happened. I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Not everyone is allowed to do that. That's sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, Jamie, since you're timekeeper, am I allowed to do my would you rather question?
Sure, Dani. We have 4 minutes, so be quick.
Okay. Would you rather be a child forever or an adult forever?
Oh my. That's really hard. Probably an adult, just because you have more choices. And I know for me, I'm like a very sensitive to like noises and sounds and everything. And I spent a large part of my childhood crying because I was overwhelmed. And it wasn't until I got to college and I realized, hey, I can control my environment. So I think being an adult, just because I can control my environment and make the choices more and not be at the whim of other people. So
I'm still at the whim of other people. I cannot escape.
I can be a childlike adult. How's that?
I think that pretty much sums me up. I'm like a child stuck in an adult's body. Fun fact, I haven't been ID'd in this country. Well, I've been ID'd 3 times in this country. And I often go and purchase alcohol with people that are older than me that get ID'd, but I don't. So clearly stuck in an adult's body because I look old.
I always had the opposite problem. I'd be the only one of my friends who was over 21 and I would get carded and they wouldn't.
I just went to the casino the other night, and if you're 21 and under, they make you show 2 pieces of ID. And I'm 24, and they still made me show 2 pieces of ID. And I was like, wow. I was with my parents too. It's not like I was just trying to go out, like, I don't know.
That's probably what it was, though. They're like, you're like being taken around by your parents, so you must be a child thing.
Maybe.
But I was like, I drove here in my own car. Like, I pay rent. Leave me alone.
Oh. Okay. So, I'm Jamie. Can you? I lost it. Like it just went. Gone.
So, just before we wrap up, we want to let you know that our next BAMFs Aloud session is with Janet Sumner Johnson, who is the author of The Last Great Adventure of the PB&J Society, and that's next Saturday. It's next Saturday, January 14th. Same time, same place, same format. And again, you can see Kathy's interview for Where Are They Now on Monday. And with that post, you can win a signed copy of the audiobook and learn more about her debut year. And then on Thursday, we're reviewing Sword and Verse, and we're reposting this video again. And we'll also post the giveaway in there so that in case for some reason you missed it on Monday, you'll have a chance to see it on Thursday.
Okay. Now, our final question, final one, as we wrap up. Usually we would, if we weren't interviewing an author, we would close our show with our #1 release for the next week. But instead, with our author interviews, we ask for the author's favorite read from the year. Given that it's just the beginning of the year, instead, we would like to know what your favorite 2016 release was.
Okay, well, I actually cheated and picked 2, and I told you I'm a librarian, so I've got to hold them up, so I've got them here. Yay! They are A Study in Charlotte by Brittany Cavallaro, which is one of my favorite books ever. I've read it 4 times. I also became friends with Brittany, and I have beta read the sequel, The Last of August, which comes out this year. I've read that 4 times too. It's awesome. And then the other one is Disenchanted, the Trials of Cinderella by Megan Morrison. This is the 2nd book in the Time, T-Y-M-E, Time series. The first book is grounded The Adventures of Rapunzel. And this is the second one, Disenchanted, The Trials of Cinderella. This takes on labor reform in the land of time. It's a take on Cinderella you have never seen before, I promise you. And I also got to data read the third one in this series, and that one's awesome too. So both of them are great series to know.
Oh, I love
in A Study in Charlotte, there's a character named Jamie. So, you know, if you want to...
All right. Yes, there is.
You could read that. And also, maybe we will now 2Ps, that other book that you mentioned. So because we both seemed really interested in it, we both did the same ooh look.
Yeah, you got to read them. They're great. The Time series is the closest thing I've read to Harry Potter that isn't Harry Potter, and it's not derivative in any way. But the kind of melding of like real world issues with whimsy, she gets it absolutely.
Huh. Cool.
Read them.
Okay. Yeah, I like Cinderella retellings, and is that middle grade based on the...
It is. It's kind of upper middle grade, lower YA. I think it's being marketed as middle grade, but like my library has it in young adult.
Okay.
So it's right on the cusp. This one reads more YA than the first one because there is a romance element in it.
Okay.
But yeah, upper middle grade, lower YA.
Yeah, because one of my favorite, my favorite book from when I was younger is Ella Enchanted. So that's a Cinderella.
Yes.
Cinderella retelling, but that's also, I think it's supposed to be middle grade, but it also kind of could be like
that's
younger YA. So
yeah. I think with retellings of like fairy tales, if they're middle grade, they feel sort of like YA just because the characters are always usually a little bit older, but
yeah,
still for like kids. I don't like calling them kids, but like, you know what I mean. Not teen, not children.
Preteens.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, thank you.
Like this one I would give to a middle schooler. This one I would probably only give to a high schooler, you know?
Yeah. That's a good like way to describe like middle school books. High school books.
I didn't go to middle school, so I don't know when I would get that, but that's okay.
What did you go to?
We had elementary school from JK to grade 8, and then high school from grade 9 to 12.
Oh.
Yeah.
Weird.
So middle school is like 6 to 8, but we didn't have middle schools.
Weird.
That's how my school was too.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I'm not even going to get started on the British system. It confuses me. Confuses me. I don't know why I'm like the door represents the outside world. In here, it's not England. But okay, anyway, thank you so much, Kathy, for joining us. We will be tweeting out links to where you can find Kathy's book and this video and all of the posts that come out next week. Next week? Yes, next week. When, Jamie and I are also starting university again, so that's going to be fun. Yes, okay, and anyway, thank you guys for watching, and we will see you next week. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you for having me.